The Valtha Empire is massive beyond human understanding. It stretches across 300 different star systems, each one filled with planets, moons, and space stations that house trillions of beings. At the center of all this power sits Emperor Drakmor on the capital world of Korthas. His palace is carved from black obsidian stone that seems to swallow light itself. The building rises so high into the sky that its upper towers pierce through the clouds. Emperor Drakmor is not someone you want to anger. He stands 12 feet tall with armor-plated skin that evolved over millions of years on his brutal homeworld. His species, the Valtha, conquered their way across the galaxy through superior technology and ruthless military tactics. They believe in order, efficiency, and absolute control. Every problem has a solution. Every weakness must be eliminated. That's how they built an empire. Among the Emperor's vast collection of treasures from 1,000 conquered worlds, one stands above all others. Her name is Ember, and she is a dragon. Not the fantasy kind from human fairy tales, but a real creature from a species so ancient that they were flying between stars before most civilizations discovered fire. Ember is absolutely breathtaking to behold. Her scales shimmer like molten copper in the light, shifting between deep reds and bright oranges depending on her mood and the angle you view her from. Each scale is as large as a dinner plate and harder than military-grade armor. Her wings, when fully extended, could cast a shadow over a small moon. And her eyes, those burning amber eyes, hold an intelligence that makes even the Emperor's advisors uncomfortable. She understands everything. She knows far more than she should. But there is something terribly wrong with Ember. Every single night, without fail, the dragon cries. It's not a roar or a growl. It's a sound that cuts straight through to your soul, a keening wail that echoes through every corridor, every chamber, and every ventilation shaft in the massive palace. The cry is so mournful and so full of pain that it wakes people from deep sleep. Some of the palace staff have requested transfers to other facilities just to escape that sound. Others have started wearing sound dampeners to bed, but even those don't completely block it out. The dragon's grief is that powerful. Emperor Drakmor has tried everything. He summoned the finest beast masters from every corner of the empire. These experts came with credentials spanning decades, with experience handling the most dangerous and exotic creatures known to exist. They examined Ember for weeks, running every test they could think of. They found nothing physically wrong with her. Next came the telepaths, rare individuals who can touch the minds of other beings. They attempted to reach into Ember's consciousness to understand her pain. But dragon minds are ancient and complex, layered in ways that even the best telepaths couldn't penetrate. They came away with nothing but headaches and a sense of profound sadness they couldn't explain. Veterinarians arrived next with scanning equipment that could analyze every cell in Ember's massive body. They checked her organs, her blood chemistry, her bone density, even the air composition she was breathing. Every single test came back normal. Ember was in perfect physical health. Yet still, every night, she cried. And as the months wore on, everyone could see she was fading. Her scales grew duller. Her movements became slower. She ate less and less, picking at the carefully prepared meals that cost more than most families earned in a year. The dragon was dying, but not from any disease the Valtha could identify or cure. It was during one of these endless crying nights that Emily Brooks first heard the sound. Emily is human, from a small colony world called New Portland that orbits a yellow star in a quiet sector of space. She came to Korthas 6 months ago as part of something called the Terran Service Program. It's a diplomatic arrangement that Earth's government made with the Valtha Empire. Humans work in various menial jobs throughout Valtha space, and in return, Earth gets protection and access to advanced technology. Most alien species in the Empire view humans as weak and fragile. They're curious about us, the way you might be curious about a colorful insect, but they don't take us seriously. Emily's job is simple and unglamorous. She cleans the western thermal halls of the palace, miles away from where the Emperor and his court conduct their important business. She mops floors, cleans ventilation grates, and makes sure the temperature regulation systems are free of dust and debris. It's honest work, but it's lonely. Most days, she doesn't speak to anyone except other human workers during their brief meal breaks. But on this particular night, while Emily was cleaning a ventilation access panel on the 3rd sublevel, she heard Ember's cry for the first time. The sound traveled through the ductwork and hit her like a physical force. She dropped her cleaning supplies and just stood there, frozen, as the dragon's wailing filled the empty corridor around her. And in that moment, Emily recognized something that all the brilliant alien experts had completely missed. She knew that sound. Not the exact sound, of course, but the feeling behind it. Emily had heard it before in her own voice, years ago, after her grandfather died. She had heard it in her mother's sobs when they received word that her brother's ship had been lost in deep space. She had heard it in her own chest during the lonely nights on this alien world, so far from everything and everyone she had ever loved. The dragon wasn't sick. The dragon wasn't malfunctioning. Ember was grieving. She was mourning something or someone, and that grief had nowhere to go. It just built up inside her, night after night, with no release and no comfort. The cry wasn't a symptom to be cured. It was a message that no one was hearing. Emily stood in that empty corridor for a long time after the crying stopped, staring at the ventilation grate and thinking. Then she made a decision that would change everything. Emily knew what she was about to do could get her fired, deported, or worse. The rules for human workers in the palace were crystal clear. Stay in your designated areas. Don't wander into restricted zones. Never, under any circumstances, approach the Imperial menagerie without a Valtha supervisor present. Breaking these rules meant immediate termination of your contract, and being sent back to Earth in disgrace. Some people whispered about worse punishments, though no one knew anyone personally who had tested those boundaries. But Emily couldn't stop thinking about that cry. She couldn't sleep. Every night she lay in her small quarters in the human worker dormitory, listening to Ember's wailing echo through the walls, and something inside her chest pulled tighter and tighter. She had to do something. Even if it was stupid. Even if it got her in trouble. She couldn't just ignore it anymore. So on the third night after she first heard the dragon, Emily made her move. She waited until her shift ended at midnight, then instead of returning to the dormitory, she headed deeper into the palace. She had studied the layout during her breaks, memorizing corridors and access points. The palace was so massive that security couldn't monitor everything at once. There were gaps, blind spots, places where a small, quiet human could slip through unnoticed. The hardest part was getting past the guard station near the menagerie entrance. These weren't just any guards. They were elite Valtha warriors, each one trained since childhood in combat and surveillance. But Emily had noticed something during her months working here. The Valtha have 3 eyes arranged in a triangle pattern on their faces. It gives them incredible depth perception and a wider field of view than humans have. But those eyes evolved on their homeworld under a sun that produces different light wavelengths than Earth's sun. When the Valtha work night shifts under artificial lighting that mimics Earth standard illumination, their vision gets fuzzy. Their 3 eyes don't focus properly. They get tired faster. Emily watched the guards from around a corner. Sure enough, 2 of them were leaning against the wall, their middle eyes drooping closed. The third guard was making rounds but moved in a predictable pattern. Emily timed her approach perfectly. When the walking guard turned down a side corridor, she slipped past the drowsy ones and ducked through the menagerie entrance. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. But she was in. The menagerie was like nothing Emily had ever seen. Enormous chambers stretched in every direction, each one housing creatures from different worlds. She passed enclosures containing beings that defied description, things with too many limbs or no limbs at all, creatures made of living crystal, animals that existed partially in dimensions she couldn't fully perceive. The Valtha collected rare species the way some people collected stamps. But Emily wasn't here for any of them. She found Ember's chamber at the end of the main hall. The entrance was sealed with an energy barrier, but there was an observation area where handlers could monitor the dragon without entering. Emily slipped into this space and finally got her first real look at Ember. The dragon's chamber was absolutely massive, larger than any building Emily had seen on New Portland. The ceiling rose hundreds of feet overhead, giving Ember room to fly if she wanted. The temperature was scorching hot, at least 40 degrees Celsius, matching the conditions of whatever volcanic world the dragon species originally came from. Emily immediately started sweating, but she barely noticed. Ember lay on a raised platform of heated metal that glowed dull red. The dragon's massive body was curled in on itself, head resting on claws the size of Emily's entire body. And from those burning amber eyes, tears fell. Not water tears though. These were droplets of liquid mercury, shimmering in silver, each one hitting the platform with a soft metallic sound. The dragon's scales, which should have been bright and lustrous, looked dull and lifeless in the dim light. When Ember's eye rotated toward Emily, the dragon didn't move. Didn't react with alarm or aggression. Emily could almost read the thought behind that gaze. What could this tiny creature possibly do? This little 2-legged thing that barely came up to the height of one claw? There was no threat here. Just another curious observer come to stare at the broken dragon. But Emily didn't stare. She didn't pull out a scanning device or try to take samples. She didn't call for the dragon or make any attempt to touch her. Instead, Emily did something very simple. She sat down. She crossed her legs, settled onto the floor of the observation area as close to the barrier as she could get, and she began to hum. The melody was old, really old. Her grandfather had taught it to her when she was 6 years old. He said it came from his grandfather, and his grandfather's grandfather before that, stretching back through generations to a time before humans ever left Earth. It was a folk song from a place called Appalachia, simple and haunting, the kind of tune that working people sang to themselves during long, hard days. Emily didn't remember all the words anymore, but she remembered the melody. She let it flow out of her, not loud, just a soft steady hum that filled the space around her. The effect was immediate and stunning. Ember's crying stopped. Just like that. The tears quit flowing. The mournful keening that had echoed through the palace for months simply ceased. In the sudden silence, Emily kept humming, her voice carrying through the barrier and into the dragon's chamber. Ember's massive head lifted off her claws. Those amber eyes, which had been half closed in misery, opened fully and focused with laser intensity on Emily. The dragon's nostrils flared, tasting the air. Her scales rippled with subtle shifts of color, a sign that handlers would have recognized as heightened interest or curiosity. Emily transitioned from one melody to another, then another. Songs her grandfather had taught her during summer evenings on New Portland. Tunes that humans had carried with them across the stars because some things are too precious to leave behind. She wasn't trying to communicate words or ideas. She was just offering presence. Company. A voice in the darkness that said you're not alone. Hours passed. Emily's voice grew hoarse, but she kept going. She moved from humming to soft singing, making up words when she couldn't remember the real ones. Ember remained motionless except for her eyes, which never left Emily's small form. At some point, exhaustion caught up with Emily. Her voice faded. Her eyes closed. She slumped against the barrier and fell into deep sleep. When the morning handlers arrived for their shift, they found a scene that stopped them in their tracks. A human woman, small and unauthorized, sleeping peacefully against the observation barrier. And Ember, the dragon who hadn't moved more than necessary in months, had crossed her entire chamber. The dragon's massive head lay just on the other side of the barrier, mere feet from where Emily slept. One enormous amber eye remained open, watching the human with an expression that looked almost like curiosity, or perhaps something more. Something that might have been hope. The head handler immediately contacted Imperial Security. Within minutes, armed guards surrounded the observation area. Within an hour, Emily was in restraints. And within 2 hours, she was standing before Emperor Drakmor himself. But the Emperor didn't order her execution. He didn't have her deported. Instead, he gave an order that shocked everyone present. The human will return tonight. We will see if this was coincidence or if she truly possesses some ability we lack. Emily had broken every rule. But somehow, impossibly, she had done what the Empire's greatest minds could not. She had made the dragon stop crying. The throne room of Emperor Drakmor is designed to intimidate. The ceiling stretches so high overhead that clouds sometimes form near the top. Pillars of black stone, each one carved with the names of conquered worlds, line both sides of the long approach to the throne itself. The floor is polished to a mirror shine, forcing visitors to see their own small reflection as they walk toward judgment. Emily stood at the far end of this massive hall, flanked by guards who each carried weapons that could vaporize her before she could blink. Her hands were bound in front of her with restraints that hummed with energy. She was still wearing her cleaning uniform, now wrinkled and stained from sleeping on the floor. Her hair was a mess. She probably smelled terrible from the intense heat of Ember's chamber. But she kept her chin up and her eyes forward as the guards marched her toward the Emperor. Drakmor sat on his throne like a mountain that had learned to breathe. He stood 12 feet tall even when seated, his body covered in natural armor plates that had evolved over millions of years. Ceremonial biosteel had been grafted onto this armor, glowing with soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. His face was almost impossible for humans to read, with features that belonged to a completely different evolutionary path. But his eyes, those 4 dark eyes arranged across his broad face, fixed on Emily with an intensity that made her knees want to buckle. Around the throne stood the Emperor's advisors, scientists, generals, and nobles. All of them Valther. All of them massive compared to Emily. All of them staring at this small human who had dared to break their laws and somehow succeeded where they had failed. The Emperor spoke, his voice so deep it vibrated in Emily's chest. The translation device attached to her collar converted his words into English a split second later. Explain yourself, human. My beast masters have studied the dragon for years. Telepaths have attempted contact. The finest veterinary minds in 300 systems have examined every aspect of the creature's biology. Yet you, a cleaning worker with no credentials or training, accomplished in one night what they could not. How did you silence the beast? Emily took a deep breath. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted, but steady. I didn't silence her, Your Majesty. I just sat with her. Murmurs rippled through the assembled court. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. Explain this statement. What technique did you employ? What technology? No technique, Emily said. No technology. I just recognized what was wrong because I felt it myself. She paused, gathering her courage. Ember isn't sick. She's grieving. She's mourning. One of the advisors, a scientist whose name Emily didn't know, made a dismissive gesture. We analyzed the dragon for psychological distress. The scans showed no abnormalities in her neural patterns. Emily felt frustration rise in her chest. That's because you were looking for something broken that needed fixing. But grief isn't broken. It's just part of losing someone you love. She turned back to the Emperor. Dragons are social creatures, aren't they? They lived in groups on their homeworld? The Emperor nodded slowly. This is documented in the historical records, yes. Ember is the last one here, Emily continued. The last of her kind in captivity. I read the memorial plaques in the menagerie. The other dragons died years ago, some decades ago. Every night, Ember calls out for them. She's looking for her family, her friends, her people. And every night, nobody answers. That's not a medical condition. That's loneliness so deep it's killing her. The throne room fell completely silent. Emily pushed forward, knowing she might never get another chance to say this. The Valtha are amazing at solving problems. You can terraform entire planets. You can travel faster than light. You've built an empire across hundreds of star systems. But you tried to fix Ember the same way you fix everything else, by analyzing the problem and applying a solution. Some things can't be fixed that way. Sometimes you just have to sit with someone in their pain and let them know they're not alone. Another advisor spoke up, her voice sharp. This is primitive thinking. Inefficient. If the dragon is experiencing distress, we eliminate the source of distress. You can't eliminate grief, Emily shot back. You can only walk through it. And you can't walk through it alone. Emperor Drakmor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his tone had shifted slightly. And this is what you did? You sat with the dragon? Yes. I sang to her. Old songs from my world. I didn't try to make her stop crying. I just wanted her to know that someone heard her. That someone cared she was hurting. The Emperor studied Emily for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he spoke. You will continue these visits. Every night, you will attend to the dragon. We will observe whether this effect persists or if it was merely a temporary anomaly. Relief flooded through Emily, though she tried not to show it. Thank you, Your Majesty. Do not thank me yet, human. If this fails, if the dragon resumes her distress, you will face consequences for breaking protocol. Over the following weeks, something extraordinary happened. Emily returned to Ember's chamber every night after her cleaning shift ended. She was given official clearance now, with guards who actually nodded to her as she passed. The observation area became her second home. She learned to read Ember's moods through the subtle changes in her scales. When the dragon was content, the copper color brightened, almost glowing. When she was sad, the scales dulled to a dark bronze. When she was curious, little patterns of light would ripple across her body like waves on water. Emily discovered that Ember understood far more than anyone realized. The dragon couldn't speak, but she could communicate through body language, through the position of her wings, through the way she tilted her massive head. Emily started bringing things from her quarters. She had a data pad with recordings from Earth, including sounds of humpback whales singing in the deep ocean. When she played these for Ember, the dragon's eyes widened. She made a sound low in her throat, not quite a cry but a responding call. The harmonics were similar, both species singing their songs into the vastness, hoping someone would hear. Emily also talked to Ember about her own losses. She told the dragon about her grandfather, who had taught her those old songs. How he died when Emily was 15, and how sometimes she still expected to see him sitting on his porch when she closed her eyes. She talked about Earth itself, that blue-green marble she would probably never see again. About the smell of rain on soil, the sound of wind through trees, things she missed so badly it hurt. Ember listened to all of it. And slowly, gradually, the dragon began to change. She started eating the food the handlers brought, actually finishing her meals instead of picking at them. Her scales regained their luster. She moved around her chamber more, even flying short distances from one end to the other. The crying didn't stop completely, but it changed. It became softer, shorter, more like someone remembering sadness rather than drowning in it. The dragon was healing. Not because anyone fixed her, but because someone finally understood what she needed. But not everyone in the imperial court was happy about this development. Chancellor Mordhose watched Emily's success with growing anger. He had been the Emperor's chief advisor on exotic creatures for 20 years. His reputation was built on his expertise. And now a human, a species the Valtha barely respected, had made him look like a fool. Every night that Ember improved was another crack in his authority. Mordhose began to plan. If he couldn't discredit the results, he would discredit the human. And in the cutthroat politics of the imperial court, he knew exactly how to destroy someone. Chancellor Mordhose was a patient predator. He had climbed to his position through decades of careful maneuvering, eliminating rivals through perfectly timed accusations and convenient scandals. He was an expert at making problems disappear, and right now, Emily Brooks was his biggest problem. For 20 years, Mordhose had been the Emperor's go-to authority on rare and exotic creatures. He had written 7 volumes on xenobiology. Universities across the empire taught his theories. When nobles acquired unusual specimens, they paid enormous sums for his consultation. His reputation was everything, and Emily's success had cracked the foundation of that reputation. Every day that the dragon improved under human care was another day that whispered through the court, the great Mordhose was wrong, and a lowly human cleaning worker was right. He couldn't allow it to continue. Mordhose spent weeks preparing his trap. He used his connections in the palace laboratory to acquire samples of psychotropic compounds, rare chemicals that could theoretically influence a creature's behavior. These substances were highly illegal, banned throughout the empire after a scandal decades ago where someone had used them to manipulate a senator's pet into attacking a rival. Possession alone carried severe penalties. Using them on an imperial treasure like Ember? That was a death sentence. He planted the evidence carefully. A small vial hidden in Emily's quarters. Traces of the compound on the clothing she wore during her visits. He even managed to introduce microscopic amounts into Ember's latest blood work, just enough to show up on a detailed scan but not enough to actually affect the dragon. Then he brought his findings to the Emperor's Security Council with a grave expression and perfectly manufactured concern. Your Majesty, Mordhose said during the emergency session he called, I have discovered something disturbing. The human worker has been chemically manipulating the dragon. The evidence he presented looked damning. The vial found in her quarters. The residue on her clothes. The compounds detected in Ember's system. Mordhose explained in his smoothest voice how these chemicals could suppress distress responses, create artificial bonding, make a creature appear calm when it was actually being controlled. Emperor Drakmor's face darkened with rage. Bring her here. Now. Emily was in the middle of her nightly visit with Ember when the guards came. She had been telling the dragon about her first day on New Portland, how scared she had been as a kid stepping off the transport onto an alien world. Ember's head was resting near the barrier, eyes half closed in contentment, a deep rumbling purr vibrating through the chamber. Then the door burst open. Armed guards flooded in, weapons raised. The captain pointed at Emily. Emily Brooks, you are under arrest for illegal manipulation of imperial property and endangering a protected species. Emily stood up, confused and terrified. What? What are you talking about? You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be recorded and used against you. The guards moved forward. Behind them, Ember stirred. The dragon's eyes opened fully, fixing on the armed soldiers surrounding Emily. A low growl built in her throat. Wait, Emily said, holding up her hands. There's been some mistake. I haven't done anything. A guard grabbed her arm roughly, snapping restraints onto her wrists. Emily cried out in pain as the restraints tightened. And that's when everything exploded. Ember didn't cry. She roared. The sound was primal, ancient, a noise that predated civilization itself. It hit the observation area like a physical wall of force. The transparent aluminum viewports, designed to withstand incredible pressure, cracked in spiderweb patterns. Guards dropped their weapons, clutching their heads as their auditory organs ruptured. Blood leaked from their ears. Some collapsed completely. Emily fell to her knees, the sound overwhelming even her human hearing. Through watering eyes, she saw Ember rise to her full height for the first time in years. The dragon's wings spread wide, filling the chamber. Her scales blazed bright copper, almost white-hot with rage. Ember had not flown in years. The handlers assumed she had forgotten how, or lost the strength. They were wrong. She had simply had no reason to fly. Until now. The dragon launched herself at the reinforced doors of her enclosure with the force of a missile. The doors, built to contain creatures that could tear through starship hulls, buckled. Ember hit them again. And again. Each impact sent shockwaves through the entire menagerie wing. The guards dragged Emily out of the observation area, hauling her toward the throne room while Ember's roars echoed behind them. Emily's mind raced. What had happened? What had she supposedly done? None of this made sense. The throne room was already packed when she arrived. The entire imperial court had assembled for what Mordhose was calling an urgent matter of security. Emily was thrown to the floor in front of the Emperor's throne. Chancellor Mordhose stood nearby, wearing an expression of righteous concern that made Emily's skin crawl. The evidence is clear, Your Majesty, Mordhose was saying. The human has been chemically controlling the dragon, making it appear calm through artificial means. This is a violation of imperial law and a desecration of a protected species. Emperor Drakmor's voice was cold as deep space. What do you say to these charges, human? Emily struggled to her knees, her bound hands making balance difficult. Your Majesty, I don't know what he's talking about. I've never used any chemicals. I just sang to her. I just sat with her. That's all. We found illegal compounds in your quarters, Mordhose said smoothly. Traces on your clothing. Even in the dragon's bloodstream. That's impossible. I don't even know what those compounds are. Ignorance is not a defense, Mordhose replied. The evidence speaks for itself. Emily felt panic rising in her chest. How could she prove she hadn't done something? The evidence was there, physical and documented. Someone had set her up, but who would believe her over a chancellor? Emperor Drakmor raised one massive hand. The law is clear. Chemical manipulation of a protected species carries only one penalty: death. The word hung in the air like a blade. Emily's vision swam. This couldn't be happening. She had helped Ember. She had done everything right. And now she was going to die for a crime she didn't commit. Then the palace shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was something hitting the building from inside with tremendous force. Again. And again. Chunks of ceiling began to fall. Courtiers screamed and scattered. The guards drew their weapons, looking around wildly for the threat. The eastern wall of the throne room exploded inward. Ember came through in a shower of stone and twisted metal. Her scales deflected the energy weapons that the guards fired in panic. Plasma bolts that could melt through starship armor bounced off her like raindrops. She was fury made flesh, a creature of ancient power that had been pushed too far. The dragon landed in the center of the throne room with enough force to crack the ceremonial floor. Her wings spread wide, blocking out the light. Her head swung toward where Emily knelt, bound and helpless, and for a moment their eyes met. Emily saw recognition there. Understanding. And fierce, protective rage. Ember positioned herself between Emily and Emperor Drakmor. Her body became a living shield, copper scales gleaming, claws gouging marks in the floor. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like violence would erupt. The Emperor's personal guards leveled heavy weapons at the dragon. One word from Drakmor and they would fire, though whether their weapons could actually harm Ember was questionable. Then Ember did something that made the entire throne room gasp. The dragon lowered her massive head. She bent her front legs, pressing her body closer to the floor. It was a bow, unmistakable and deliberate. But she wasn't bowing to Emperor Drakmor, ruler of 300 systems. She wasn't acknowledging the power of the Valtha Empire. Ember was bowing to Emily. The message was clear to everyone present. This dragon, ancient and powerful, had chosen her loyalty. And it wasn't to the Empire that imprisoned her. It was to the small human who had seen her pain and simply sat with her in the darkness. Who had asked for nothing in return except to ease a little bit of loneliness. Emperor Drakmor stared at the scene before him. And for the first time, Emily saw something shift in his expression. Understanding. Or perhaps just the beginning of it. Emperor Drakmor had not survived centuries of imperial politics by being stupid. He understood power in all its forms, including the kind of power that came from absolute loyalty freely given. And what he witnessed in his throne room was loyalty that no amount of technology or force could manufacture. Ember, a creature older than most civilizations, had chosen to protect the human over obeying the empire that owned her. That meant something. The Emperor raised his hand, and the guards lowered their weapons. The tension in the room dropped slightly, though everyone remained on edge. Drakmor looked from the bowing dragon to Emily, still kneeling with bound hands, then to Chancellor Mordhose, who had gone very pale. Chancellor, the Emperor said slowly, This dragon has broken through reinforced barriers designed to contain planet-destroying weapons. She has crossed half the palace to reach this human. She demonstrates clear preference and protective behavior. He paused. Yet you claim the human was controlling her with chemicals. Mordhose stammered. Your Majesty, the evidence. If the human was chemically controlling the dragon, then the dragon would have no will of its own. It would not break free. It would not choose. Yet I see choice very clearly displayed before me. The Emperor's voice grew harder. I want a full investigation. Not by you, Chancellor. By independent auditors. Every piece of evidence will be examined. Every chain of custody will be verified. And if I discover that someone in my court has fabricated charges against an innocent worker to protect their own reputation, there will be consequences. The color drained completely from Morthus's face. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, realizing that anything he said now would only make things worse. The investigation took less than 6 hours. The auditors were thorough and, more importantly, they weren't invested in protecting Morthus's reputation. They found everything. The requisition orders for the illegal compounds that traced back to Morthus's personal accounts. Security footage showing him entering Emily's quarters when she was on shift. Laboratory records that had been altered to show the compounds in Ember's blood work, with the digital fingerprints of Morthus's staff all over the files. By evening, Mordhose was in chains. By the next morning, he was on a transport to a penal colony at the edge of Empire space, where he would spend the rest of his very long life breaking rocks on a frozen moon. The Valtha didn't believe in quick punishments. They believed in long, slow consequences. But something else happened during those hours of investigation. Word spread. In a palace filled with thousands of workers, courtiers, diplomats, and visitors from hundreds of different worlds, news traveled fast. The story was too good to keep quiet. A human cleaning worker had helped an ancient dragon when the Empire's greatest experts failed. She'd been falsely accused by a corrupt official. And the dragon herself had broken free to protect her human friend. Within a day, the story had spread beyond the palace. Within a week, it had reached other star systems. And everywhere it went, people started asking questions. If a human could solve a problem that Valtha technology couldn't, what else might humans be good at? What other problems had the Empire been approaching wrong? Requests started coming in. A mining colony on the Outer Rim had been dealing with labor disputes for years. Traditional Valtha solutions involved increased surveillance and stricter penalties, but nothing worked. Could they have a human mediator come talk to the workers? A research station studying a newly discovered species was struggling to communicate with them. The creature seemed intelligent but didn't respond to any standard contact protocols. Could a human offer a different perspective? At first, these requests confused the imperial bureaucracy. Humans were janitors, cooks, maintenance workers. They weren't diplomats or scientists. But the requests kept coming, and some of the people making them were important enough that they couldn't be ignored. Emperor Drakmor spent several days thinking about what this all meant. He consulted with advisors who weren't afraid to tell him hard truths. He even, surprisingly, asked to speak with Emily. She met him in a private chamber, much smaller and less intimidating than the throne room. Ember was there too, because Emily refused to go anywhere in the palace without the dragon now, and the Emperor had decided that arguing with them was pointless. The galaxy is watching what happens next, the Emperor told her. I can suppress this. I can make new laws that forbid humans from taking positions outside their assigned roles. I can control the narrative and maintain the old order. Emily nodded slowly. You could do that, yes. Or I can adapt. I can create something new. But I need to understand what that would look like. He leaned forward, and despite his size and power, there was genuine curiosity in his expression. What did you do that we could not? Explain it to me in a way I can understand. Emily thought carefully before answering. Your people are amazing at solving concrete problems. You see something broken, you fix it. You see an obstacle, you remove it. But Ember wasn't broken. She was grieving, and grief isn't something you fix. It's something you walk through. You just needed to be there with her, acknowledge her pain, and let her know she wasn't facing it alone. This seems inefficient, the Emperor said, though his tone suggested he was testing the idea rather than dismissing it. Maybe, Emily agreed. But some of the most important things in life are inefficient. Love is inefficient. Friendship is inefficient. They take time and attention and they don't always have measurable outcomes. But they matter anyway. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then he made his decision. I am creating a new position. Imperial Companion. Your role will be to tend to Ember, but also to advise me and my court on matters where the traditional Valther approach has not succeeded. You will have authority to speak freely, even when your ideas contradict our established methods. Do you accept? Emily's eyes went wide. Your Majesty, I'm just a cleaning worker. I don't have any qualifications. You have the only qualification that matters. You succeeded where we failed. And you did it through methods we need to understand. He gestured to Ember, who was watching this exchange with clear interest. The dragon herself vouches for you. I cannot think of a better recommendation. So Emily became the first Imperial Companion in the history of the Valther Empire. The traditionalists in court were horrified. A human given direct access to the Emperor? A cleaning worker elevated to a position of influence? It violated everything they believed about proper hierarchy and order. But the results spoke for themselves. Emily helped negotiate the labor dispute on the mining colony by introducing the concept of actually listening to worker complaints instead of just punishing them. She assisted the research team by suggesting they try approaching the alien species through music and rhythm rather than language. Not every problem she touched got solved, but enough of them did that people kept asking for her input. As for Ember, the dragon stopped crying entirely. Every evening, Emily would finish whatever task the Emperor had set for her, and she would return to Ember's chamber. Sometimes she sang the old songs her grandfather taught her. Sometimes she just sat in comfortable silence while Ember's scales shifted through colors that indicated contentment. Sometimes the dragon would rumble in deep, complex harmonics that made the walls vibrate, sounds that seemed to carry meaning even though no translator could decode them. Linguists and scientists recorded these sounds, trying to understand them. They never quite succeeded, because they were looking for language when what was happening transcended language. It was communication on a level that didn't need words. Understanding that existed in shared presence and mutual care. 3 months after her appointment, Emily stood in the palace gardens with Emperor Drakmor, watching Ember fly lazy circles overhead. The dragon was fully healthy now, her scales brilliant in the sunlight, her movements graceful and powerful. I have a question for you, Emily said, watching Ember dive and soar. What happens when the Empire encounters something it can't conquer? Something that can't be defeated by technology or force? The Emperor's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Then the Empire must learn to coexist with it. Find accommodation. Or, Emily said carefully, maybe the Empire learns to serve it. To care for it not because you own it, but because it's valuable in itself. The idea hung between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Service instead of conquest. Care instead of control. For an empire built on dominance, it was a radical thought. Dangerous even. But Drakmor was old and wise enough to recognize truth when he heard it. You're suggesting we fundamentally change what we are. I'm suggesting you add something new to what you are, Emily corrected. You're still incredible engineers and warriors and explorers. But maybe sometimes, the answer isn't to conquer. Maybe sometimes it's just to be there. Above them, Ember spread her wings wide and called out. Not in grief this time, but in joy. The sound echoed across the palace grounds, and for those who understood, it carried a message. The dragon who had wept in loneliness now sang in companionship. Broken not by force, but healed by presence. And in the halls of the obsidian palace, where darkness had once swallowed all light, there was now singing. Human singing, dragon harmonics, and slowly, carefully, the sounds of an empire learning a new way to exist in the galaxy. Not through conquest alone, but through connection. Through the simple, profound act of sitting with another's pain and saying, you are not alone. The humans, other species would learn in time, had a power that couldn't be measured in weapons or ships. They could take suffering and transform it into bridges. They could teach even the mightiest empires that sometimes strength looked like vulnerability, and victory looked like simply showing up. And they could teach ancient dragons how to live again, one song at a time.